Good morning, Chair Vollendroff, Member Garrett, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Good morning. Thank you, Deb. Welcome to the Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, April 22nd. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the meeting. I have a couple of quick announcements where Board Member Holmes is not with us today. He's receiving some professional education and training today. I also want to acknowledge that both Board Member Holmes and myself were confirmed by the Senate last week, and so it's nice to have a fully confirmed board again, and a nice way to kick off this meeting. So with that, speaking of the legislature and action in Olympia, I'm going to turn it right over to our legislative liaison, Mark Webster, for a legislative update.
Well, good morning, Chair Vollendroff and Member Garrett. This is the final in-session update of the 2025, which is something I'm both excited and kind of astonished by. I think it was a very good session as far as our legislative agenda goes. Both of our agency request bills passed. One, House Bill 1341 on the medical cannabis excise tax exemption has already been signed by the governor. And the other, House Bill 1698 on mask permits and some liquor law cleanup, is awaiting signature and was just sent to the governor yesterday. Licensing staff, of course, worked on that bill, made it something worthwhile, and that passed without any amendments. And so I am hoping that some of the folks who came up with that idea and got the bill into shape get to go to that signing. And as you just mentioned, of course, we saw the confirmation of you, Chair Vollendroff, and Member Holmes. I think it wasn't as quick and easy as we'd like, but that's okay. And I definitely think it's going to be important as we move into rulemaking and the development of future legislative agendas. So I'm really glad that was able to happen.
Me too.
I think it's fair to say that our legislative agenda was limited or kind of technical in nature. We weren't really advancing, big shifts in policy, which I think is fine. We're doing the product placement work, something that would generate more controversy than our legislative agenda through rule, and I think there are very good reasons for that we've talked about a lot. So I think we had a modest legislative agenda, but I'm glad that we did get it passed. Beyond our agenda, the cannabis industry was able to pass two bills with broad support. The first is the Retail Advertising Bill, Senate Bill 5206. Again, we helped with the language last year, but I think some concerns in the House and in the public health and prevention community blocked it in 2023 and 2024. It had an amendment to get public health and prevention to neutral, and so it's going to pass in 2025. The second one is Senate Bill 5403 regarding management agreements for retail cannabis stores. The bill makes very clear what is and is not allowed in these contracts and would forbid centralized purchasing for more than 5 stores, branding or IP deals on more than 5 stores, regardless of whether or not the agreements confer ownership or a share of the profits, that sort of a thing. Smaller stores argued that existing law allowed stores to band together to have the buying power or brand ID of like a really big chain. And so the bill clarified that these agreements are not allowed. I think this one is going to be a very closely watched rules project, but I'm glad that the legislators' direction here is so clear. We'll probably be focused on what does and does not confer or influence control over a store. On the alcohol side, we got incremental and small cleanup type bills like our agency request bill. There's the on-premise purchasing limit bill, House Bill 1636, that was signed yesterday. And then the contract kitchens bill 1602 that the Brewers Guild had put forward. I think that one's being signed today. Most importantly, or the most significant to our work, is, of course, House Bill 1515, the outdoor dining and the World Cup bill and all that was advanced by the city of Seattle. The final form of that bill required us to set permit fees to cover our costs of implementation. I think that's a really very difficult math problem without a lot of time to really check our work. They also reduced the barriers to local governments. So previous versions had asked the cities that asked for this permission to kind of set aside their own resources for enforcement and cleanup and the like, but those provisions were removed. So we'll just have to see how it goes. This is likely to be another complicated rules project with lots and lots of input, oversight from interested parties. I think local governments are going to be their licensees, of course, probably public health and prevention as well. And so for now, I think our attention is really focused on the budget and the many revenue bills that are moving through the legislature this week to help balance it. And of course, our finance team will go through it as soon as it's released and ensure that any provisos or transfers or directives are implementable. And that's something that we're just going to be working hand in hand with our finance team and the executive branch so that we're all on the same page as far as that final deal goes. A lot of people are asking me, are they going to get out on time? My sense right now is that they will. I think the thing that's up in the air, of course, is what the governor will do with a lot of those revenue bills. I think he's made it clear that he's not thrilled with the amount of new revenue in the budget, but does that rise to the level of vetoing it or not? And I think we'll see soon enough. I would expect that budget to be released this week. Are there any questions?
Board Member Garrett, any questions?
On the 5403, the management agreement,
Yeah.
if there are folks that are not in compliance with it right now, do they have to, is it going back or only going forward? Do you know?
Very, very good question. And I'm glad that the legislature made this part very clear, because again, I think that this is the kind of question that could really throw a rulemaking process into chaos. But it applies to existing ones, so it goes back. It's retroactive, and the legislature has made that very, very clear. So hopefully this isn't something we have to fight with anybody about. It's written into the bill. So even existing management agreements would have to be kind of wound down. And again, I think there's all sorts of legal things there that we'll get into. But yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's great, and I appreciate you asking that question, Board Member Garrett. Mark, along those same lines, that sounds like something that's helpful to us that's included in that piece of legislation. Were there other things that we were advocating for that were included that make it helpful moving forward?
Well, I think this wasn't one of our bills, but it was one of the only things I think that most sections, or maybe even all interest groups in the cannabis side, kind of agreed on. And so
Right.
what we had told legislators and those stakeholders was just be as crystal clear as you can be. Do not leave things up for interpretation. So if you want something allowed or disallowed, be very, very clear in your direction. And so I think as it was moving through, certainly in the House, amendments made it even more clear. So I do think that's going to help us as we get to rulemaking. I don't think it's going to fix every little thing that people can disagree on or fight about, but I think we're starting from a good place.
That's great. Well, it sounds like the rules team is going to be very busy in the coming months. I have two other quick questions related to things that you gave us update. You mentioned on the advertising bill for cannabis that there was an amendment by Public Health that got them to neutral. Can you talk about what that amendment was that got Public Health on board, or at least to neutral on this bill?
Yeah, I can send some additional information if you need, but one of the things was, so this bill allows for more signs on a retail property. And I think one of the things that they wanted was that those signs be located on kind of the main front entrance way, so not wrapped around the building, essentially. So that was one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anything you can send. I would appreciate any information that gives a bit more detail. And then the final one is related to the World Cup bill. Is there a time limit on that? Does that expire at some point? What's the duration of that?
I think I believe it's at the end of 2027. And again, when it came out of the House, or the House Policy Committee, they had two separate sunset dates, and I think those have been lined up at the end of calendar year 2027.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mark?
Nope.
Well, I'd just like to say on behalf of the board, I know you've still got a little bit more work to wrap this session up, but thank you for all your hard work and for your presence up there. I know that your presence and Director LaKayla's presence up there has been helpful, and I appreciate the work that you guys have done this session.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move on to the policy and rules team for updates and board meeting preparation. And so I have Jeff up first. Jeff, are you? I have both Jeff and Denise. So I'm going to let you guys decide who's up next. I see Jeff on camera, so I'm assuming it's you, Jeff.
Yes, I think I'm up first.
All right.
Today. Okay,
Welcome.
thank you. Good morning, Chair Volendroff and Board Member Garrett. At tomorrow's board meeting, I will present the Director's Office response and recommendation to the board regarding 3 identical rulemaking petitions, with each petition making the same request to the board to amend the law in RCW 6624-395. This request is to allow passenger trains offering short excursions or scenic trips inside of the state of Washington to provide the same or similar alcohol service to passengers on board that is available on other common carriers, such as aboard large passenger airlines or Amtrak trains. The board received these 3 petitions for rulemaking from Eric Mensis, Bev Wilson, and Mr. R.T. Williams on behalf of the Western Forest Industries Museum, operators of the Mount Rainier Scenic Railroad based in Elbe and Mineral, Washington. The Mount Rainier Scenic Railroad offers scenic passenger rail trips in Pierce and Lewis counties near Mount Rainier National Park on historic railway cars pulled by steam locomotives. Although the board lacks the rulemaking authority that is reserved for the legislature to change any RCW statute, including this one, 6624-395, the board's licensing division has assisted the Western Forest Industries Museum to apply for a nonprofit organization license that will allow for spirits, beer, and wine service on board the train excursions, just as they requested in these 3 petitions. And it also has assisted the museum with possibly obtaining a special occasion license, allowing alcohol service at other museum events. So because the board does not have the lawmaking authority to amend RCW 6624-395, Director's Office staff will recommend tomorrow that the board deny these 3 petitions. However, as I've mentioned, the museum is eligible for a nonprofit organization license that would allow the same kind of service that they've requested in these petitions. So I'm happy to answer any questions about these petitions or the response I'll present tomorrow. Thank you.
Board Member Garrett, seeing no questions, I would just like to acknowledge the work of the licensing team to support this request in another way that is helpful to them while pointing them in the direction of the RCW. So that's great. All right, thank you. All right, Jeff, I think you're up again for the next one as well.
Okay, thank you. Good morning again, Chair Volendroff and Board Member Garrett. At tomorrow's board meeting, I will present a CR 101 package for rulemaking to consider amending WAC 314-02-045, which would make it easier for alcohol licensees to make seasonal adjustments to their hours and days of operation for beer and wine restaurants. This rule section currently requires license holders to be open for business to the public for at least 5 hours a day, 3 hours or 3 days per week throughout the year. Many Washington restaurants experience variations in the numbers of customers that they serve throughout the year. This can be due to seasonal fluctuations in the number of part-time residents in their communities, or seasonal fluctuations in the number of visitors to their geographical area. This is especially true in regions of the state, such as the San Juan Islands, Leavenworth, and the many wilderness areas that attract visitors every year for seasonal outdoor activities. I will be requesting your approval to file the CR 101 at tomorrow's board meeting. If approved, there will be an informal comment period open until June 6th. I will explain the expected rulemaking timeline in more detail during tomorrow's board meeting, but we plan to complete this rulemaking so that the board can file a CR 103 in August, so that the rule changes could go into effect in September of 2025. I'm happy to answer any questions about this rulemaking on seasonal hours for beer and wine restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions. I see no questions. Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, next we have Denise, who's going to rule for a rules petition review and consideration regarding packaging of cannabis edibles. Denise, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Volendroff and Board Member Garrett. This morning, I am previewing for you 2 petition responses I'll be presenting for action during tomorrow's board meeting. On February 27th, Caitlin Ryan, Executive Director of the Cannabis Alliance, submitted 2 petitions for rulemaking. Both of these request rule changes related to cannabis packaging. The first petition requests amending WAC 314-55095 to remove the requirement that a single unit of cannabis concentrate cannot exceed 1 gram. Statute does not require this size limit, and other states also do not have the same requirement. The reasons given for this request include reducing packaging waste, improving customer convenience, reducing the number of non-recyclable lithium-ion batteries, and promoting the use of reclosable, child-resistant packaging. The second petition requests amending WAC 314-55105 to remove the requirement that cannabis edibles approved by the board on a case-by-case basis may be packaged loosely within a resealing child-resistant package. The reasons given for this request include reducing plastic waste, enhancing child safety, and streamlining the regulatory review process. Neither of these petitions would eliminate other packaging requirements, including around child-resistant packaging, or would change existing transaction limits. Cannabis product packaging and wastes appears to be an ongoing issue among stakeholders, as we have received comments and petitions related to packaging and the use of certain materials. I'll provide more information tomorrow about current cannabis packaging requirements and how these changes may affect packaging waste at the board meeting tomorrow. Opening rules to address broader packaging and labeling improvements warrants further consideration. However, the target date for starting such a project is unknown at this time. This is mainly due to the number of active and pending rule projects, including those resulting from this legislative session. As available resources may be limited, accepting these rule petitions at this time may be frustrating for stakeholders if opening the rule project is not as timely as expected and not a priority amongst all the other active and pending rule projects. Because of existing and pending rulemaking priorities at this time, the Director's Office is recommending that these petitions be denied. We expect to open rulemaking in the future to address these issues related to cannabis packaging and labeling generally, and these petitions could be combined with that effort when it is scheduled. And I can provide more information about that also tomorrow, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Denise. Board Member Garrett, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I do like that we're denying it, but saying we're open to in the future considering what some of these requests.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Denise. So we will now move on to the 5th item. You covered items 3 and 4 on our agenda. We'll go on to the 5th item, which is board approval of supplemental CR 102 minors on non-retail cannabis licensed premises.
Yes. Good morning again, Chair Volendroff and Member Garrett. This morning, I'm here to preview the supplemental CR 102 with proposed rule language to amend WAC 314-55015 to allow minors on non-retail cannabis premises that I will be requesting approval of during tomorrow's board meeting. If approved tomorrow, there will be a public comment period open until June 5th, when we plan to hold a public hearing on the proposed rules. Assuming the public hearing doesn't identify any reason to substantially change the proposed rules, the final rules will be requested for board approval during a June 18th board meeting and would become effective on July 19th. Yes. Sorry, just had a little moment there. This rulemaking is the result of 2 petitions from Crystal Oliver related to adopting and expanding a COVID allowance that was in place through December 2022. The COVID allowance permitted children and grandchildren of licensees on non-retail cannabis licensed premises under certain conditions. The initial CR 102 included 2 groups of minors, defined as persons under the age of 21, to be allowed on licensed cannabis premises with related under specific conditions. The first group is children and grandchildren of licensees, and the second group is employees of contractors working on premises in fields such as electrical, plumbing, and construction activities. This required adding new language to WAC 314-55015 in several places. Following the public hearing on February 26th of this year, proposed rules with the CR 102 were amended to incorporate comments received during the public comment period, as well as direction from the board. The supplemental CR 102 materials that we are bringing for approval tomorrow include tables showing the proposed changes to the original CR 102 filed on January 15th, as well as changes proposed with this supplemental CR 102 for people to be able to track these changes over time. And those tables are found with the CR 102 materials. I'll give more detail tomorrow about the changes we made to the proposed rules for the supplemental CR 102 filing, but they include allowing children and grandchildren in areas where cannabis is present if accompanied and supervised by the licensee, that the licensee must be on the premises at all times if their child or grandchild is present, and removing the requirement that licensees must notify the LCB prior to their child or grandchild being present. I will address the changes made for the supplemental CR 102 in more depth tomorrow, but otherwise I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have this morning.
Thank you, Denise. Board Member Garrett, any questions? All right, hearing no questions, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow on that one. And so last up, Denise, you've got CR 103 implementation of second substitute House Bill 2151 regarding the transfer of cannabis lab accreditation.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
can give your voice a rest after this one.
Yes, I do. Well, it's good practice for tomorrow.
Yes.
Good morning again. And this morning I'm going to preview the CR 103 that the Director's Office will be requesting approval of at tomorrow's board meeting related to the transfer of cannabis laboratory standards and accreditation. If the final rules are approved tomorrow, they will be filed later in the morning and become effective on May 24th of this year. As a reminder, this rulemaking involves implementing 2 main pieces of legislation, House Bill 1859 from 2022 and second substitute House Bill 2151 passed last year, and amend sections of Chapter 314.55 WAC related to the transfer of cannabis laboratory quality standards and accreditation from the LCB to the Washington State Department of Agriculture. This rulemaking consists of amending 4 sections and repealing 2 sections in WAC 314.55 chapter. The CR 102 was filed on February 26th of this year, and the public hearing was held on April 9th. We received 15 comments during the public comment period, 12 written comments, and 3 oral comments at the public hearing on April 9th. 9 of these comments indicated concerns that the proposed rule changes, language changed reporting requirements related to R&D or non-mandatory samples. The language of concern was the existing language that had been moved verbatim from a repealed section, WAC 314.55.103, into an amended section, into 314.55.0995. And while our intent was never to change existing policy, the LCB recognizes that this proposed rule language change may have been interpreted that way based on the broader context of the rule. Accordingly, the word required has been inserted into the first sentence of WAC 314.55.0995 subsection 3H in the final rule for clarification and consistency. This sentence now reads, certified laboratories must report all required test results directly into LCB's traceability system within 24 hours of completion. We plan to schedule additional rulemaking to follow up on comments received during this rulemaking related to the reporting of non-mandatory or R&D sample test results into LCB's traceability system. This new rulemaking will be initiated with a CR 101 to be presented to the board this summer after the current rules take effect. If approved tomorrow, the rules to implement second substitute House Bill 2151 take effect on May 24th. I described the rule language in detail during the CR 102 presentation on February 26th and reviewed it again prior to the April 9th public hearing. I don't plan on going into the rule language again in as much detail tomorrow unless you'd like me to, as we do have a fairly full agenda tomorrow. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Denise. Board Member Garrett, any questions? All right, great. Thank you for all your work on this, and we will see you tomorrow. All right, thanks very much. All right, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is a Healthy Youth Survey update. And this is part 2 of a presentation. We started with an update from the research team, ran out of time, and because this is such an important topic and wanted to give it its appropriate amount of time, you guys are back. And so welcome and thank you. I look forward to getting this update on the Healthy Youth Survey. And so I'll turn it over to Kristen, Sarah, and Tyler this morning.
Hello, good morning, Chair Vollendroff and Member Garrett. A pleasure to be here today. So as you mentioned, we're making this presentation as our part B of our earlier presentation that we did on March 18th. Member Garrett, you were unfortunately not there for that presentation, but that was largely our research program updates, and we'll fill you in on that when we meet next week, and we're happy to answer any questions here too. Unfortunately, Member Holmes is out today, so when we meet with him next, we'll be sure to provide him with these updates today as well.
Thank you. So
the presentation today is specifically on Healthy Youth Survey updates, and these updates will be presented by Kristen Haley, our Public Health Education Liaison, and Tyler Watson, our Research Specialist. Briefly, the Healthy Youth Survey is a project that takes up a lot of effort and time for both Tyler and Kristen, our research team, and Kristen all year round. Kristen, particularly as the lead, and Tyler are regularly attending meetings, problem solving, working out kinks, communicating with different teams, getting everyone on the same page, and going through this arduous process of research and going through this research cycle. So we really want to share updates with you because even though the Healthy Youth Survey comes out biannually, it's not a we're working on this once every 2 years. This is a we're working on this every single week of every year. And we do this so we can track substance use and behavioral risk and protective trends of our youth, which is instrumental for public health and safety. So that being said, this project is a wonderful example of collaboration. Both Kristen and Tyler have been absolutely amazing working on this project, and I truly just want to emphasize that the amount of time that goes into this project is often overlooked. So Kristen and Tyler, I will let you take it away and front load this with thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do on this project. It's really amazing. So we have about 10 minutes of content, but then the rest of the time that we've allotted for this will be for discussions and comments and questions. And we do really want to have those comments and questions as well. So Kristen,
Great.
I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. Good morning, Chair Bolandroff and Member Garrett. Like Sarah said, I'm Kristen Haley, Public Health Education Liaison. While there are many projects that I work on in my role at LCB, there is not another project that I consistently work on more than Healthy Youth Survey, just to give you context of its role in my portfolio. The Healthy Youth Survey is a statewide survey implemented with select grades every other year. It has been around for over 20 years and was written in as part of a People's Initiative and is state funded in statute through the dedicated cannabis account. And the survey is administered in collaboration between 4 agencies, which makes it pretty unique. No other project have I ever worked on in my career where 4 agencies actually equally co-manage the project. Usually there's one agency that's the true lead, and then other agencies are sort of partnering. But with HYS, we all have to agree on things and move in lockstep. So those agencies are LCB, Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Department of Health, and Healthcare Authority. And then each of our agencies put forward staff with expertise in areas like communications, data analysis, survey design, community engagement, and then collectively, we make this survey happen together. Next slide, Tyler. This survey is implemented on a 2-year cycle, like Sarah said, and also like she mentioned, that doesn't mean the work goes dormant in off years. So I thought it would be helpful to explain what that cycle looks like. If you look at this slide, we can start where we are right now. So we just wrapped survey preparation. This involves IRB approvals, which Department of Health takes the lead on as the principal investigator with the Washington State IRB. We also review a ton of materials at LCB and the other agencies do as well. Not only the survey itself, which is quite large, we look through the entire survey, as do the other agencies, to make sure all of the revisions we made in previous parts of the cycle are reflected. But we also look through all of the supplemental materials for parents and schools. We make sure the website's ready to be pointing people towards it. There's a lot of comms materials that get reviewed. And this is also our time for systems checks. I think of this stage as the kicking the tires before a road trip, just making sure that everything works before we send the masses our way. And then the next 2 parts of the cycle, we don't do as much from the LCB perspective. So that's recruitment and registration, or administration and implementation. However, as challenges arise or unforeseen events take place, we do have a role in finding solutions. So we're still pretty actively engaged during these stages. For example, a real-time example, each agency has a designated HYS lead, and whenever any key issues arise, all 4 leads have to gather to make key decisions. And I'm LCB's designated HYS lead, and there is currently an issue going on right now that has required all of the leads to be gathering several hours over the last few months to broker an agreement on a challenge that we've been facing related to the survey. And it's very time consuming, but it's also necessary work. So sometimes that's us meeting and then us going to the larger HYS group and us sometimes going back to our agency leadership to say, how does this sit with you? Would we be okay with this compromise, and so forth. So there's a lot of diplomacy involved. And like I said, all decisions have to be made in a way that all 4 agencies agree on the final decision. So it's a lot of time-consuming negotiations, let's say. Any of the agencies with staff that understand number crunching and survey analysis pitch in during the next huge lift, which is data processing once results are in. And then overlapping with that phase is the communication folks from each agency start circling the data people. And I really think of this like vultures because I'm one of the communications people. And we try to get early estimates or a sense of themes that might be emerging, basically anything that we can start writing into a press release and talking points. And we do this because the dissemination always goes out in mid-March to early April at the latest. And that doesn't allow a lot of space between data being final and then the comms materials getting approved between 4 agencies. And you can imagine, even if this was just something going out with one agency, a huge data set needing to be developed into a report, you would want the comms team, the data team, and leadership all to agree on what the outward messages to the public, right? What is that communication strategy? And then you multiply that by 4 agencies, all with different political intentions and grant requirements and, different responsibilities to their stakeholders. And pretty soon that's a massive project, but we always have to do it within like a 3 to 4 week period of time. So there's usually a around the clock, sometimes six days in a work week type of work weeks to get that out the door. And then the final big lift of the cycle is with survey revisions. And we'll talk about examples from the last cycle in a couple of slides. Tyler will walk through some of those examples. But this process involves stakeholder engagement, many rounds of discussions, prioritizing hundreds of items between all 4 of our agencies. And it's the stage that I think requires the most diplomacy between our agencies because, again, we get these survey revisions in and whether it's to add something, change something, or delete something, all 4 of our agencies have to be in agreement about all of those pieces for hundreds of questions across the survey, which you can imagine is a very epic and mind-numbing Excel spreadsheet, which I complained about every step of the way, much to the chagrin of my colleagues. So you're probably starting to understand why I say I consistently work more on this project than any other. Collectively throughout the year, there's always something to tinker, remove, discuss, or whatever related to HYS. Next slide, Tyler. This will be the last one that I talk on, and then I'll hand it over to Tyler. The research program presented the results, if you remember, from the 2023 HYS last spring when the results were fresh. And I think we recirculated after we spoke last month that link, but we can do that again after we talk today. But we thought you'd appreciate just a quick reminder of where youth are for the substances we regulate. So this bar graph here shows you the past 30-day use for 10th graders. There were not significantly different data from the results in 2021, and substance use remains 50% lower than pre-pandemic rates, which is overall really good. One question we get all the time is, these numbers look low. 9% is a lot better than 50% or whatever. We get those questions a lot. I try to remind people that 9% of 10th graders using alcohol is still way too many 10th graders because their brains are still developing. There are, real long-term consequences for youth using these substances. And so our goal is always going to be to reduce these numbers as far as we can. And that's where some of our regulations and protecting the public's health and safety come in at LCB. But with that, I'll hand it over to Tyler to talk with you about some of the changes that we worked on for the upcoming survey. And then we should have plenty of time for questions still. Go ahead, Tyler.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen. And I'll be brief, but just to reiterate what Kristen mentioned, we thought it would be of interest and by way of update to talk about some of the revisions that were proposed and approved for the next implementation. So for 2025, some of the questions that LCB either directly requested or contributed to for 2025. Not comprehensive though. So the first one, and I'll spend the most time on this one because the Healthy Youth Survey Planning Committee, of which we are a part with the other agencies, does a process in the fall of the off year of the revision year, where they get students together. They get students who would be the population who takes the survey, and they do a few focus groups. And this is actually a pretty big lift to get all the approvals and all of the processes in place to actually host these discussions with some of the students, adolescents who would be taking the survey. And we contribute to that. And one of the ways that we contributed to that the purpose of the focus groups is to ask questions and get a sense from students on some of the changes, usually more of the unknown factors that we're considering for the survey. So new questions, sensitive questions, things that have generated a lot of interest, things like that. And so one of the things that we, on behalf of LCB, proposed for this revision cycle's focus groups was to ask students about crossover beverages, and not just ask them about it, but actually show examples and ask them about it. So it's a really unique opportunity to be able to do this. And this came up from internally, Kristen hearing this from communities and partners, other folks at LCB saying like, hey, we're hearing a lot about crossover beverages since it's this growing area of alcohol products. And so that actually is now part of one of our research briefs on alcohol product placement, actually covers this a little bit. So anyways, back to the questions we asked, we contributed these questions to the focus groups, showing this picture of examples and asking the adolescents in the focus groups, how familiar are you? How would you describe these products? And have you heard of this term, crossover beverage? Sorry about that. And what we heard just briefly was that while the students in the focus groups were pretty familiar with the non-alcohol versions of these brands and beverages, the fact that they had these alcohol-containing versions was kind of new, and they didn't really have language to describe them. They certainly hadn't heard of the term crossover beverages. So what we kind of landed on was, based on student input, was to just use the terms hard or spiked when we're referencing beverages like this. So this helped inform, we're not going to ask them specifically about crossover beverages, but we will modify some of the questions that ask students about alcohol choices, alcohol preferences, and overall alcohol consumption. So that's kind of what we heard from the focus groups on that. And then I've just got a few changes to quickly review. So again, this is not comprehensive, but we thought we would just present a few of the edits, a few of the changes we're making for 2025. One of those changes is adding perception questions, risk perception questions around e-cigarette or vaping use. We ask a series of risk perception questions for other substances, in particular alcohol and cannabis, but we had not yet updated these questions to include vaping. And here's some examples of those risk perception questions. If you wanted to get a vape, how easy would it be? How much do you think people risk harming themselves if they vape regularly? And how wrong do you think it would be for someone your age to vape? So these are some of those risk perception questions that give us a more comprehensive look at how adolescents are thinking about substance use beyond just, did you use this at any point? And it helps us inform prevention and public health activities. She's got a couple more. We also updated the definition. Really, what happens with a survey this large is we have areas that aren't consistent across every single question in every single section. And so one of the things we did was we said, hey, let's make sure we're defining an alcoholic drink the same, updating that as a glass of wine, bottle or can of beer, a shot glass of liquor, a mixed drink, etc. So we improved that, made it more consistent across the survey. And then also, and this is where that focus group input comes in, we added 2 different options because we do ask about the type of alcoholic beverage. If you have consumed alcohol, what types of beverages do you typically consume? By far, the most preferred type of alcohol among adolescents who respond to the survey is liquor, but we have these other product categories. And so for 2025, we're adding cider, and we're adding, again, informed by the focus groups, spiked or hard beverages such as seltzer, tea, lemonade, or soda, since this is a much more comprehensive category of beverage than it was in previous years. And that's the language that students suggested. We also improved hemp-derived products. That we asked that for the first time in 2023. Again, another category of product that is increasing in size and prevalence. But if you have ever used hemp-derived products like Delta 8, Delta 10, or THCO, how did you get them? And so we updated this in part because to reflect the most common forms of hemp-derived products that we know are either available or used, Delta 8 and Delta 10 in particular, and also the using the Delta symbol as well, which is increasingly an accepted way to write out those titles. And finally, and I think this one's really important, we really push for this, is adding online and social media as a response option when we ask students, how do you get whichever the substance is that we're asking about. So during the last 30 days, for example, that's our current use question. If you used whichever substance it is, how did you get it? Choose all that apply. And we see that, again, by far, most students get substances from people they know, their peers, older adults, but other options certainly are important too. And starting in 2025, all questions that ask about sourcing will add, I got them from a social media app or from the internet. And so we feel like that's a really important change, as we know that's both increasingly available and also really, really difficult to track and to enforce things like age verification in the online marketplace. So that's all we have. Questions?
Great. Thank you very much. I have a couple questions, and then see if Board Member Garrett has any questions. But starting with the Healthy Use Survey, and you may have covered this, but can you remind me how the Healthy Use Survey is funded? I mean, we've got these 4 state agencies. Where does the funding come that supports the Healthy Use Survey?
Through the dedicated cannabis account.
Oh, that's right. You
directly
did say that.
through a proviso to Healthcare Authority.
Great.
It's a small amount of money that solely funds the subcontractor that they use to do some of the survey data collection.
The reason I ask is because I'm just wondering, with all the shifts in funding at the federal level and different things that are happening, will it impact the Healthy Use Survey at all? Or is there potential for it to impact the funding for the Healthy Use Survey?
Yeah, I think the short and complicated answer is yes. With a wide lens, I believe the impact is going to be more in an indirect way. So all of the agencies, with the exception of Department of Health, are currently offering our services as just part of our job description. So there is no like designated amount in my position description or funding amount in my position description, or Tyler's or Sarah's dedicated to Healthy Use Survey. It's written into our PDs that we are to work on it, but it's not like I receive Healthy Use Survey funding, nor does Tyler or Sarah. Same with Healthcare Authority and with Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Department of Health does have dedicated FTE to this because they've been able to work it into various grants over time. They're the only agency with FTE. So setting them aside, the rest of us at the table are and also with the exception of LCB, because we get our funding through revenue generated from cannabis and alcohol and whatnot. OSPI and HCA, however, get their funding from federal and state funds that are getting pinched right now. And so there is concern that the staff that they have at the table who are participating in HYS are growing, their project portfolios are growing thin. So they are having to cover more work as people are getting potentially laid off, or grant funding is going away and people are having to cover more. Do you see what I'm saying? So like as some of these pillars are going away, people in public health and prevention are having to cover more ground. And we do foresee that we've already had to start telling the folks around the table, the leads have had to start telling the folks around the table stop taking on new projects. So there's been this innovative cycle we've been in for a while where we've taken on new projects and expanded the survey over time. And we've had to, in recent months, say no more expansion. And in fact, let's start rolling back because we no longer have the people power to sustain that. And we actually think we're going to have to probably pull back even further. We don't know how far yet, so I don't want to speak too drastically about that, but that is a serious concern that we're trying to be very pragmatic about right now.
Okay, thank you. I had another question related to the process for reviewing and choosing questions, and I don't really have a question about that itself because you covered that pretty well in the presentation. But Tyler, you mentioned, so I really appreciated hearing the process of finding out how to best ask the question of young people related to crossover products and recognizing that that was a term that didn't resonate with them. And so we came up with a different term so that we really were getting to the data that we needed around crossover products. I was wondering if that were going to be true, and maybe you guys did the Delta 8. Like, I can't imagine saying to a kid, did you use Delta 8 products and having them go, oh yeah, Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, I get that. And so I was just wondering about that question. And was there a similar conversation about how do we really phrase it in such a way that young people realize what we're talking about versus, and maybe they do, maybe I'm just so out of the loop based on my age that maybe they all do understand Delta 8, Delta 10. So I'm curious about that particular question.
Yeah, it's a good question. When it comes to using the very limited time we have with adolescents, we can't ask about everything, of course, that we would have liked to. So that's not one that we in particular asked to get specific input
Focus
and
group
feedback
on. Yeah.
But we did look at other sources of information, like which ones are the most prevalent, most used, that kind of a thing. It's actually an interesting example of sometimes, especially when there's new products, new substances on the market, we kind of take our best guess at using some of the common names, and that can actually sometimes not be the most clear. And so one of the things,
crossover being a good example.
Yeah, like I'm sure that'll change over time. But there's things where we kind of try to use a name that we think might be relevant, and I think we've kind of moved away from that. Like, let's wait until someone tells us, like, no, this is not how it's being referred to. So it's a tricky area. Go ahead, Sarah.
And this is the way that it was phrased in 2023 was we grouped substances, these emerging substances together. And so this is kind of a stepwise process where in the 2025, we kind of took out these hemp-derived products so we can see these specifically emerging hemp-derived products specifically. And I do think, to your point, there is a lot of confusion, and it might not just be specific to youth. We're also seeing confusion in adults as well, where adults, legal consumers, don't know the difference between what is hemp versus what people are purchasing in legal markets. And so I think that question is really a good question across age groups and something that a lot more work needs to go into. Kristen?
Yeah, I was just going to add 2 points. One, when I made the point earlier that the revision process is the biggest act of diplomacy for the group, where like we probably did 20 rounds around that 2 sentences of hemp derived with the delta and all of that, just trying to figure out the best wording, and took all of these pieces into consideration. And then 2, sometimes when it is an issue that we know the population is confused about, the best thing to do is just throw something out there and see what the survey results look like. Because if they're going to be confused no matter what the question is, however the question is asked, that tells us something, and then it's kind of a lead for us to at least unpack, and maybe that's something we can focus on more in the next focus groups the following year. So sometimes we can get ourselves into a state of paralysis, overthinking how exactly we word things. And I think that's a really good example of one that sometimes we just have to say, time out, everybody, let's just word it how it's worded and see what happens, and then move from there. It's better to get something from the results than nothing. Go ahead, Sarah.
And right now it's worded the same, it's worded very similarly to how it's worded in the International Cannabis Policy Study. So there's some parallel. So is it perfect? Probably not. Are some people going to be confused? Probably yes. And is it better than last cycle? Yes, we're getting there. Progressive
Great.
improvements.
Well, thank you. Board Member Garrett, did you have a question?
A comment. Is there any thought or any conversation around educating youth on the cannabis being laced with fentanyl and things like that, and how to determine, how to detect it, on and on and on?
I can speak to, I just happen to know, because this was part of my body of work at Department of Health before I came to LCB. That is a component of the youth cannabis prevention campaign, making sure that youth understand that not only with cannabis, but with other substances, that what they are purchasing may not be exactly what they think it is. And there's crossover between the overdose prevention, the opioid overdose campaign, and the cannabis prevention education campaign that's managed by the same team. So they cross over their messages to make sure that youth are receiving that important message. So
Right. So
yeah.
it is being communicated out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Great,
That's
thank
all.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, with the interest of time, I'm going to stop asking questions, but I will leave the team with something to think about that I would ask that when you meet with board members individually, I'm thinking specifically of Board Member Holmes as a new board member, to be talking to us about the value of our participation in this project. I have heard some say, well, we do a really good job in our E&E from keeping young people from accessing products that are in the regulated market. And so therefore, young people are actually getting it outside the regulated market. And so then questioning why we spend so much time focusing on this given that particular stat. And I just think it's incredibly important that board members understand and that we are engaged in this conversation and recognize how do we use this material to make good policy decisions, and what is the role of the research team and the prevention and public health in helping us as board members make good public policy decisions related to the regulated products that we oversee. So anyway, I'll leave with that. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, and that takes us to our last agenda item, which is board member or executive assistant updates. Board member Garrett, anything to add for the good of the order today? Okay, see none. Deb, do you have anything, or Gretchen?
No, we do not. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That concludes the meeting of the Board Caucus today. Thank you. Bye.